I never thought a simple scarecrow could trigger the ugliest war of my life. It started small, just a harmless decoration standing tall in my field, meant to keep crows away from the crops. But to the Karen sisters next door, it was an open invitation to stir chaos. They laughed at it, mocked it, and eventually began destroying it piece by piece. At first I brushed it off, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. But every time I rebuilt it, they came back. Every time I patched it up, they tore it down again. The final straw came one evening when I caught them filming themselves with my scarecrow, ripping off its arms and driving off in their shiny Lamborghini like they owned the whole neighborhood. My blood boiled. It wasn't just about the scarecrow anymore, it was about respect. They thought they were untouchable because of their money, their car, their smug attitudes. They believed they could trample over anyone without facing consequences. So I decided to build something new, not just a scarecrow, a fortress disguised as one. I reinforced it with steel pipes, filled it with weight, and anchored it deep into the ground. It looked the same from a distance, but it was unmovable, indestructible. The sisters wouldn't be able to break this one, no matter how hard they tried. And when they came back, speeding in their precious Lamborghini, aiming to humiliate me one more time, they didn't expect what happened next. The car met steel instead of strong. The sound of twisted metal filled the night. Their laughter stopped instantly, replaced by shock and panic. For the first time, they realized the scarecrow wasn't just a joke. It was my revenge. The scarecrow was never meant to be a battlefield. When I first put it up, it was nothing more than a humble guardian of my crops, a simple creation of straw, wood, and old clothes stitched together. I gave it a wide-brimmed hat and a tattered coat, more out of sentiment than necessity. To me, it wasn't just a figure standing in the field, it was a symbol of my hard work, a quiet reminder that everything I planted needed protection. Every farmer has his tools, and that scarecrow was mine the first time the Karen sisters saw it. I was standing at the edge of the field with a watering can in my hand. Their car came roaring down the narrow country lane, its engine growling like a beast that didn't belong in the quiet neighborhood. It wasn't just any car, it was a bright yellow Lamborghini, polished so much that even the dust of the road seemed afraid to cling to it. Inside sat the sisters, each one a mirror of the other, bleach blonde hair, oversized sunglasses, lips pursed into smirks that screamed superiority. They looked at my scarecrow and burst into laughter. "Is that your guard dog?" The elder one yelled out the window, her voice dripping with mockery. The younger sister pulled out her phone, aiming it like a weapon. "Oh my God, look at this thing. It's like something from a horror movie. People are going to die when they see this online." I tightened my grip on the watering can but said nothing. They laughed harder, revved the engine, and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust swirling around my scarecrow's still figure. I remember looking at its stitched-up face, its hollow eyes staring blankly at the horizon, and I thought, "You'll have to be tougher than that." A week later I found it lying flat on its back. Its hat was missing, one arm ripped off, and its wooden post snapped clean in two. I stood there in silence, staring at the wreckage, my chest tight with frustration. It wasn't just straw and wood that had been broken, it was the principle of it. I knelt down, touching the torn coat that had once belonged to my father, and I felt anger coil inside me. Still, I told myself not to make it bigger than it was. I rebuilt the scarecrow, stronger this time, with new rope and a sturdier post. I patched up the coat, stuffed more straw into its frame, and set the hat back on its head. When I was done, it looked even prouder, standing tall as if it had survived some invisible war. But the sisters weren't done. A few days later I woke up to laughter outside my window. I rushed out to find them circling the field in their Lamborghini, recording videos as they drove dangerously close to the crops. The scarecrow was still standing, but not for long. With a quick turn of the wheel, the younger sister swung the car just enough to clip the post. The scarecrow wobbled, tipped, and fell with a sickening crack. The sisters howled with laughter. "Oops, guess it wasn't strong enough." The driver sneered before speeding away. I stood there, watching the dust settle again. My fists clenched, my heart pounded. My scarecrow lay broken for the second time, its straw guts spilling across the dirt. The neighbors peered through their curtains, but no one came out. Everyone knew the Karen sisters. Everyone knew their father's money, their lawsuits, their endless ability to make life miserable for anyone who crossed them. People avoided them like a disease, but me, I was already infected with rage. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the broken pieces stacked against the wall. I told myself I should let it go, that maybe if I ignored them they'd move on to some other target. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. People like them didn't stop. They fed on weakness. Every time I rebuilt the scarecrow, they would return, laughing louder, hitting harder. I dragged the pieces out under the moonlight and began again. My hands worked without thought, tying, stuffing, securing. Each knot was tied with a silent promise. I hammered the post deep into the ground, making sure it wouldn't topple so easily this time. I stood back and looked at my creation. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and it was standing again. The next morning the sisters returned. I heard the roar of their engine before I saw the flash of yellow cutting down the lane. They pulled up by the edge of the field, music thundering from their car. The younger sister leaned out the window, phone in hand, grinning like a cat. "Back again," she taunted. "You really don't learn, do you?" The elder sister slipped out of the car and strutted across the dirt path in her high heels. She yanked the Scarecrow's arm with a sharp tug, then twisted until the rope snapped. Straw spilled to the ground. She laughed, tossed the arm into the field, and turned to her sister. "Your turn." The younger one ran forward, kicking at the post until it cracked and fell again. Both of them cheered, filming the entire destruction like it was the climax of a comedy show. Then they climbed back into their car, threw a mocking wave at me standing in the distance, and roared off, leaving the broken body of my Scarecrow in the dirt once more. I walked slowly toward it, each step heavier than the last. My hands trembled not from sadness, but from the boiling fury I was trying to contain. I knelt down beside the wreckage and whispered, "They think this is a game." The Scarecrow's empty eyes seemed to stare back at me, hollow but knowing, and in that moment something shifted inside me. This wasn't just about straw and wood anymore. This was about respect. This was about standing my ground against people who believed they were untouchable. The Scarecrow had been my symbol of patience and care, but now it was going to become something else. That night, as the wind howled across the empty field, I began planning. If they wanted a game, I would give them one. But this time, the Scarecrow wouldn't fall. This time, it would fight back. The morning after the third destruction, the field felt different. The air was heavy, like it carried the weight of something unspoken. My Scarecrow lay in a heap, torn apart once more, its clothes scattered like fallen flags of defeat. But as I stood there, staring at the broken frame, I felt no sadness, only fire. The sisters had turned my patience into ashes, and out of those ashes came something sharper, harder. A decision I would not rebuild the same fragile figure again, not this time. If the Karen sisters wanted to laugh, let them laugh when their arrogance came face to face with something that refused to break. That afternoon, I drove into town, not to the gardening store where I'd once bought straw and rope, but to the hardware yard where the smell of iron and oil filled the air. The clerk raised an eyebrow when I asked for steel rods thick enough to carry weight. He asked what I was building. I smiled faintly and said, "Something that lasts." I left with a truck bed full of metal, cement bags, and welding supplies. The plan formed in my mind as clear as the sky above me. The Scarecrow would look the same on the outside: straw hat, ragged coat, stitched face, but its core would be different. Inside, it would be unyielding, a skeleton of steel instead of wood. I would anchor it into the earth with cement so deep even the wind would respect it. On the surface, it would remain harmless. But for the sisters who thought it was just another toy to break, it would be a wall they could not push through. I started work as the sun set, hammering the first rod into place. The clanging echoed across the empty field, each strike carrying my determination into the night. I worked in silence except for the sparks of the welder and the rhythm of my heartbeat. My hands burned, my back ached, but I didn't stop. With every piece of steel I fastened, I imagined the look on their faces when they realized they couldn't destroy it. I imagined the silence that would fall when laughter turned to shock. The neighbors noticed the glow of my work at night. Curtains shifted, shadows lingered, but no one spoke to me. They had seen enough of the Karen sisters' cruelty to understand that I wasn't just fixing something, I was preparing for something. And maybe, deep down, they hoped I would succeed where they had always stayed silent. By the third night, the skeleton of the Scarecrow was complete. It stood taller than before, heavier, solid like a tower. I filled the base with cement, sealing its feet into the soil. When I pressed my hands against it, it didn't budge, not even an inch. It was no longer a figure that could be toppled with a kick. It was a statue of defiance. But I wasn't done. I wrapped the steel in layers of cloth and straw, disguising its strength beneath the same ragged clothing it had always worn. I stitched the hat back into place, giving it the same crooked look the sisters mocked before. From a distance it looked identical, but I knew, and soon they would know, that this was not the same Scarecrow they had destroyed. This one would not bend. During the day, I pretended everything was normal. I tended the crops, repaired the fence, waved to neighbors as though I were just another man busy with his land. But at night, I tested the Scarecrow again and again, pulling at it, striking it, trying to move it. It never gave way. My creation was ready. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew the sisters would come again. It was in their nature. They couldn't resist the game. To them, destroying my Scarecrow wasn't just fun, it was proof of their power. Their Lamborghini wasn't just a car. It was their weapon, their stage, their way of announcing to the world that no one could stop them. And so I waited, knowing that sooner or later, they would drive back down that lane. Music blasting, cameras ready, arrogance dripping from their every gesture. One evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of fire, I heard the familiar roar. My pulse quickened. The yellow flash appeared at the far end of the road, slicing through the silence. The Lamborghini approached fast, its headlights cutting across the field like a predator's eyes. I leaned against the fence. On the outside but burning on the inside. They pulled up, windows down, laughter already spilling out before the car had even stopped. The younger sister lifted her phone, already filming. "Well, look at that," she said, pointing. "He built it again. Doesn't this guy get tired of losing?" The elder sister smirked, slipping out of the car in her designer heels. "Let's see how long it lasts this time." They strutted toward the Scarecrow, mocking every step of the way. My chest tightened with anticipation, but I said nothing. I simply watched. The younger one grabbed the arm and yanked. Instead of ripping free, the Scarecrow stood firm, the steel hidden beneath unyielding. She frowned, pulled harder, and still it didn't move. "What the?" she muttered. The elder one stepped up, giving it a sharp kick with the heel of her shoe. The Scarecrow didn't even flinch. Their laughter faltered, replaced by irritation. They circled it, tugging and shoving, but it remained unshaken, silent and immovable like a sentinel. "This isn't funny," the elder snapped, sweat glistening on her forehead. "What did he do to it?" The younger one's lips curled into a smirk again, though it was thinner, forced. "Fine, if it doesn't fall by hand, let's see what the car can do." My heart pounded. The moment had come. They climbed back into the Lamborghini, revved the engine, and lined up with the field. The roar of the car thundered through the air, a beast charging toward its prey. But this time, the prey wasn't helpless. This time the Scarecrow stood waiting, its body of steel hidden beneath straw and cloth. I didn't move. I didn't shout. I simply stood there, watching as the car sped forward, dust and fire in its wake. My creation was ready. The sisters thought they were unstoppable, but they were about to meet something that refused to bow. The game was about to change. The engine's roar grew louder, a wild animal charging through the quiet evening. My pulse matched its rhythm, each thundering second stretching longer than the last. Dust swirled up behind the Lamborghini like a storm cloud, the headlights slicing through the twilight, hungry and merciless. The Karen sisters were laughing inside, their voices carried faintly across the field. To them, this was entertainment. Another video, another cruel prank. They had no idea they were racing toward their own lesson. The Lamborghini shot forward, its tires screaming against the dirt road before veering onto my land. The earth trembled beneath the weight of its speed. I could see their smug grins through the windshield, the younger sister holding her phone up like a trophy, already recording the moment of victory. But their victory was an illusion. The Scarecrow didn't tremble, didn't sway. It stood like a soldier carved from stone, cloaked in straw but armed with steel. As the car closed the gap, time seemed to bend. The sisters' laughter echoed strangely in my ears, like voices underwater. I watched every detail: the gleam of the hood, the wild glare of their eyes, the ridiculous confidence painted on their faces. And then, in an instant, laughter turned to shock. The Lamborghini struck the Scarecrow head-on. The sound was unlike anything I'd heard before, sickening. Mixture of metal folding, glass shattering, and steel refusing to yield. The Scarecrow didn't topple. Instead, the car crumpled around it, the hood buckling like paper, headlights exploding into shards that scattered across the field like falling stars. The impact jolted through the ground, a violent quake that rattled my bones. Inside, the sisters' screams replaced their laughter. Airbags burst open with a hiss, smothering their panicked faces. The Lamborghini's nose folded inward, steam hissing from the radiator, the proud yellow body now mangled and scarred. The Scarecrow stood rooted in place, its stitched smile frozen, its hat still tilted as though mocking their arrogance. I didn't move at first. I let the silence stretch, broken only by the groaning metal and the frightened gasps of the sisters trapped inside. Slowly, I walked toward the wreck, each step deliberate, my boots crunching over broken glass and fragments of plastic. My Scarecrow loomed above the crushed Lamborghini, its shadow cast long by the fading sun, no longer a figure of straw but a monument of justice. The elder sister was the first to recover, her voice shrill and shaking. What the hell was that? She struggled against the deflated airbag, her sunglasses knocked crooked on her face. Her confidence was gone, replaced by panic. The younger sister fumbled with her phone, still recording though her hands trembled violently. The video captured everything. The crash, the broken car, the Scarecrow standing undefeated. Her wide eyes darted between the camera and the figure outside. For the first time, her smirk was gone. You set us up," she screeched through the cracked window, pointing a shaky finger at me. "You tricked us." I stopped a few feet from the wreck, arms crossed, gaze steady. "No," I said calmly, my voice cutting through the night air. "I built something that couldn't be broken. You chose to test it." Their mouths opened but no words came out. They were too busy wrestling with a reality before them. Their Lamborghini, their symbol of wealth and power, lay broken at the feet of something they thought was worthless. The neighbors had gathered now, drawn by the crash. Curtains flew open, doors creaked and figures emerged, whispering in disbelief. For years, everyone had suffered the arrogance of the sisters, had watched silently as they terrorized the street with their entitlement, and now they watched as the untouchable were brought low, their expensive toy destroyed by what they thought was a joke. The elder sister finally shoved her door open, stumbling out on shaky legs. Her heels sank into the dirt, her perfect image unraveling as she staggered to her feet. "You'll pay for this," she screamed, pointing at me with trembling rage. "You damaged our car. Do you know how much this costs?" Her words sounded hollow against the backdrop of twisted steel and the murmurs of the crowd. For once, no one seemed afraid of her. The neighbors didn't look away this time. They didn't retreat behind their curtains. They stood openly, watching, some with smirks hidden at the corners of their mouths. The younger sister crawled out on the passenger side, clutching her phone as though it were a lifeline. The camera was still rolling, catching her tears, her ruined makeup, the shaking of her manicured hands. "We'll sue you," she wailed, her voice breaking. You can't do this to us." I took a step closer, my shadow stretching across the broken car, joining the Scarecrows and casting them both in darkness. My voice was calm, measured, but sharp enough to cut. "You destroyed what was mine, over and over again. You thought it was a game. Now you sit was never a game." They stared at me wide-eyed for once without a comeback. The Lamborghini hissed beside them, smoke curling into the night sky, its once pristine body ruined beyond repair. The Scarecrow loomed behind, untouched, its straw hat tilting in silent defiance. The crowd whispered louder now, their voices carrying fragments of long-buried resentment. "To serves them right." Finally, someone stood up. About time they learned. The sisters heard it too, their faces paling as they realized they had lost more than their car. They had lost their power, their fear-driven control over the neighborhood. The elder one finally snapped, her pride bleeding through her fear. "This isn't over," she shouted, though her voice cracked at the edges. We'll make you regret this." But even as she said it, the words rang empty. She knew, everyone knew, there was nothing left for them to threaten. Their Lamborghini, their invincibility, their smug superiority all had crumbled against the steel hidden in a simple Scarecrow. I turned away without another word, leaving them in the wreckage of their arrogance. My Scarecrow still stood tall, its stitched grin fixed on the horizon. For the first time, I felt peace in its presence, not as a guardian of crops, but as a guardian of respect. As the sisters sat in the dirt, their car broken, their laughter silenced, the truth settled over the field like the cool night air. They weren't untouchable. They never had been. And now, everyone knew it. The morning after the crash, the field was quieter than I'd ever known it. Dew clung to the crops, glittering in the soft light of dawn. And in the center of it all stood the Scarecrow, untouched, unmoved, its crooked hat casting a shadow across the ruined Lamborghini still resting in the dirt. It looked almost like a monument now, a statue marking the place where arrogance had been defeated. By noon, the sisters returned with their father. He was a tall, broad man with silver hair slicked back and a scowl carved deep into his face. He didn't drive a Lamborghini. He drove a black Mercedes, polished until it shone like a mirror. He stepped out, his tailored suit looking absurd in the dusty field, and for a moment he didn't say anything. He just stared at the wrecked sports car as if the sight had personally insulted him. "This," he said finally, his voice low and full of venom, "is unacceptable." The sisters clung to him like frightened children, their bravado gone but their entitlement intact. "He did this on purpose," the elder one wailed, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at me. "He built some kind of trap. He tricked us into hitting it." Their father's eyes shifted to me, cold and sharp. "You'll pay for this," he said. "The damage to my property will not go unpunished." I met his gaze without flinching. "Your daughters destroyed my Scarecrow 3 times. I rebuilt it. They chose to hit it again. The Scarecrow didn't break this time. That's all there is to it." He stepped closer, his polished shoes sinking into the dirt. "Don't play games with me. That car is worth more than your entire farm." "Then maybe," I replied evenly, "you should teach them to value what isn't theirs before they go around breaking it." Gasps rippled through the neighbors who had gathered again, watching from the safety of their fences and porches. For years, no one had spoken to the sister's father like that. His reputation was enough to silence most people, but I felt nothing but calm. The Scarecrow behind me gave me strength, a silent reminder that some things simply couldn't be pushed down. He jabbed a finger at me. "I'll see you in court." And with that, he turned, ushering his daughters back into the Mercedes. The car's engine purred as it rolled away, leaving the ruined Lamborghini abandoned in my field like a carcass. True to his word, the next week a notice arrived, formal papers, stamped and sealed, accusing me of deliberately causing damage to the sister's car. According to the claim, I had engineered a malicious trap disguised as farm equipment, intending to cause harm. The sum they demanded was outrageous, more than the value of my land itself. I laughed when I read it, not because it wasn't serious, but because the absurdity was almost comical. The sisters had destroyed my property over and over again, and now they were painting themselves as victims. But I knew better than to dismiss it entirely. In their world, money bought influence, and influence often bent the truth. At the local cafe, whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear? They're suing him. He'll lose everything. No one beats that family." Yet, there was something different in their voices this time, not just fear, but curiosity, even hope. They had seen the crash with their own eyes, seen the sisters reduced from tyrants to trembling girls. And maybe, just maybe, they wondered if this was the beginning of something new. The days leading up to the first hearing were tense. The sisters paraded around town despite their embarrassment, telling anyone who would listen that I was a psychopath, that I had weaponized a scarecrow. They posted clips online, trying to spin the story in their favor. But the video betrayed them. Their laughter before the crash, the way they swerved deliberately, their mocking voices. By the time the clip spread, most people weren't laughing with them, they were laughing at them. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The sisters sat with their father, dressed in expensive suits, their confidence patched back together with designer fabric and practiced sneers. I sat alone, with only truth on my side. Their lawyer painted a picture of cruelty, describing me as a bitter man who had constructed a metal trap to ruin the lives of two innocent young women. He waved photos of the destroyed Lamborghini like holy scripture, his voice rising in theatrical outrage. But when my turn came, I didn't give speeches. I simply laid out the facts. I told the judge about the scarecrow's history, about how it had been destroyed multiple times. I showed the timeline, the neighbors' statements, the videos recorded by the sisters themselves. And finally, I showed the clip of the crash, unedited, raw, undeniable. Their own laughter hung in the courtroom before being replaced by the sickening sound of metal on steel. The room fell silent. The sisters' smugness withered under the weight of their own evidence. Even their father shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. The judge leaned back, her eyes sharp. "What I see," she said, "is not a trap, but an act of carelessness on your part. You drove your car into another person's property, with clear intent to damage it. The scarecrow was sturdier than you expected, that's all. Case dismissed." The words echoed like victory bells. The sisters' mouths fell open. Their father's face darkened, and the crowd in the gallery whispered with excitement. For the first time, justice had not bent to money. Outside, the air felt lighter. Neighbors approached me cautiously, some offering handshakes, others quiet nods of respect. One elderly woman said softly, "You did what we all wanted to do for years. You stood up to them." But the sisters weren't finished. Their pride was too wounded, their arrogance too deeply rooted. In the days that followed, they doubled down. They tried to spin the loss into sympathy online, claiming the judge was biased, that the whole town was against them. They spread rumors, trying to claw back the power that had slipped through their fingers. Yet something had changed. Their words no longer carried the same weight. Their laughter, once feared, now sounded hollow. The neighborhood began to breathe easier. People who had stayed silent for years started to speak up, small acts of defiance showing that the sisters no longer held everyone in their grip. One evening, as I stood in the field beside my scarecrow, I heard voices on the road. A group of kids passed by, pointing at the figure and laughing not with mockery, but with admiration. "That's the scarecrow that beat the Lamborghini," one of them shouted. The others cheered. I smiled quietly, resting a hand on the steel post hidden beneath the straw. It wasn't just my guardian anymore. It had become a symbol for everyone who had ever been pushed down, mocked, or silenced. The sisters had tried to break me with lawsuits and lies, but all they had done was prove a truth they could never erase. Respect cannot be bought, and arrogance eventually destroys itself. And though I knew they would try, again because people like them always did, I also knew something they didn't. This time, I wasn't alone anymore. The weeks after the court case brought a strange calm to the neighborhood. For the first time in years, the sisters were quiet. Their Lamborghini remained abandoned in my field, a broken monument to arrogance, while the scarecrow stood proudly above it. Life began to feel normal again. Children played outside without fear. Neighbors greeted each other with lighter voices, and the air of intimidation that had hung over our street started to fade. But deep down I knew the silence was only temporary. People like the Karen sisters didn't accept defeat. They plotted, they schemed, they clung to their pride like a drowning man clings to driftwood. I could feel it in the way their curtains twitched whenever I walked past their house, in the way they hissed under their breath at the cafe, in the glares they threw when they thought no one was watching. Their last attempt came on a moonless night. I had been out in the field, checking the irrigation lines, when I noticed the sound of footsteps, quick and uneven, carrying across the soil. My heart quickened. The scarecrow loomed ahead, its silhouette blending with the darkness, its steel frame hidden beneath its tattered clothes. Then I saw them, both sisters, dressed in black hoodies carrying cans of gasoline. Their plan was obvious. If they couldn't break the scarecrow, they would burn it, destroy the symbol they could never conquer. I stayed in the shadows, watching. The elder sister unscrewed the cap of a can, her hands trembling more with fury than fear. "We'll see how strong it is when it's nothing but ashes," she whispered. The younger one nodded, striking a match with a nervous flick. The flame illuminated her face, twisted with desperation. For a moment, I almost felt pity to women so obsessed with winning that they didn't realize they had already lost. I stepped forward then, my voice sharp against the silence. "Put it down." They spun around, startled, the flame wavering in the younger sister's hand. The elder one snarled, her voice dripping with venom. "You ruined everything. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You think this stupid scarecrow makes you a hero. It's not about being a hero," I said evenly. "It's about standing up to people who think they can do whatever they want without consequences. You brought this on yourselves." The younger sister's grip faltered. the match trembling dangerously close to the gasoline. "Do it," the elder barked. "Light it." But before the flame could touch the fuel, a chorus of voices rose from the darkness. Lights flicked on around the field, neighbors stepping out with phones in hand, recording, watching. Some held flashlights, others simply stood together, but their presence was undeniable. "Put it down," someone shouted. "This ends tonight." Another voice rang out. The sisters froze, their faces pale in the sudden glare. For years, the neighborhood had been silent, cowed by their arrogance. But now, united, they stood as witnesses. The sisters weren't just facing me anymore, they were facing everyone they had bullied, mocked, and intimidated. The younger sister's match burned low, singeing her fingers. With a hiss of pain, she dropped it into the dirt. The flame sputtered out harmlessly. Gasoline soaked the ground, but no fire followed. The elder one cursed, throwing down the can in frustration. "It doesn't matter," she spat. "We'll find another way. You can't win forever." But her words rang hollow, carried away by the cool night air. The neighbors didn't move, didn't retreat. They stood firm, their quiet strength louder than any threat. For the first time, the sisters seemed to understand. Their power was gone, not because of a scarecrow, but because no one feared them anymore. The police arrived soon after, summoned by calls from nearly every house on the street. The sisters tried to spin excuses, claiming they were just playing around, but the gasoline on their clothes and the video evidence in dozens of hands told another story. They were taken away in the back of a squad car, their shouts fading into the night. When the sirens disappeared, the neighborhood let out a collective breath. People gathered around the scarecrow, laughing softly, clapping me on the back, congratulating me for holding my ground. One elderly man shook his head with a smile. "That thing's stronger than any of us ever realized," he said. I looked up at the scarecrow, its stitched grin still staring into the darkness, its steel body untouched despite the attempt to destroy it. It had become more than I ever intended. It wasn't just a guardian of crops, it was a guardian of respect, of unity, of a neighborhood finally free from fear. In the days that followed, the sisters were charged with reckless endangerment and property damage. Their father, weary of the humiliation, sold the ruined Lamborghini for scraps and retreated from the spotlight. The sisters themselves became a cautionary tale, whispered about but never admired. They had gone from untouchable queens of arrogance to outcasts trapped by their own pride. The scarecrow still stands in my field today. Children stop to take photos with it, calling it the Lamborghini Slayer. Neighbors bring visitors by to tell the story, their voices proud instead of fearful. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded of the night everything changed, not because steel stopped a car, but because a community found its voice. The Karen sisters thought they could destroy me. Instead, they destroyed themselves. And I just built a scarecrow.